This is the fourth episode of my Flat Earth Conspiracy series. Before I go, don't shy to subscribe this channel to follow the update. Thank you. In previous episodes, we've had answer 5 of 10 arguments that make us believe that the Earth is round. In this episode, we will discuss number 6, about eclipse that prove the Earth is likely round. Since childhood, we had taught that a lunar eclipse caused by the shadow of the Earth, which is spherical, one thing that cannot happen if the Earth is flat. Eclipses can be predicted accurately by NASA in detail. Of course, you assume that NASA calculate the rotation orbit of the Moon and the Earth's orbit around the Sun, so that they can predict exactly when the Moon passed the shadow of the Earth, right? Wrong. A big wrong. Let's prove together. Let's check the NASA's website, how they exactly predict the eclipse. Look, NASA can predict the eclipse accurately by Saros cycle. What is it? Saros cycle is the method of calculation created by the ancient Babylonian, now is Iraq. Was made thousands of years ago. Ancient Babylonian astronomers observed the eclipse as a routine event, same as a day and night. They calculate the time range of each eclipse, so they find the cycle called a Saros cycle. According to them, a lunar eclipse occurs in the cycle of 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours. This cycle is also the same as a solar eclipse. Based on that cycle, NASA can predict eclipses for 150 years, from 1091 to 2045. Then, NASA create an animation of eclipse with fake globe. In that animation, the eclipse can be calculated by counting the movement of the Earth and the Moon revolve around the Sun. In fact, they use Saros cycle of Babylonia, which has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. Nothing to do if the Earth is box, triangular or flat. Eclipse always happen based on Saros calendar. Ancient Babylonian makes Saros cycle based on the assumption that the Sun and the Moon revolve around the Earth or geocentric. The most important question is, why NASA has budged trillions of dollars per year are able to hire professors and doctors anywhere in the world that are very good at astronomy, geology, mathematics, not counting the eclipse predictions through the movement of the Earth around the Sun? But uses a Saros cycle made by ancient Babylonian thousands of years ago. We will answer this question later, because this is all caused by essence. It is said that the distance of the Moon and the Earth is 384,400 kilometers. You'll think that it's measuring or calculated by modern science. But the distance of the Moon and the Earth are calculated by the Greece ancient astronomer, Aristarchus of Samos 2,300 years ago. Aristarchus calculated the distances of the Moon using trigonometric formula at the time of a lunar eclipse with the assumption that Moon into the shadow of Earth's shadow, so this is an old story. As already presented in the episode, the theory of the Earth around the Sun have been around for 2,500 years ago. Aristarchus even calculate the distance of the Moon based on that assumption, then obtained number 240,000 miles or 384,400 kilometers. Is this the fact? Of course not. This is a trigonometric calculations assuming that eclipses occur because the Moon enters the Earth's shadow. This simple analogy, he calculate length of rats by measuring the long tail that is assumed is the tail of a rat. Be a problem if his measure is the elephant's tail, resulting in the agency's calculation of the rat as big as elephant body. Using the same assumptions, Aristarchus then measured the diameter of the Moon through the phenomenon of the eclipse. And then obtained the diameters of the Moon are 1 per 3.6 times of the Earth, which are 3,443 kilometers. After obtaining the distance of the Moon, scientists of ancient Greece 2,300 years ago that measured the distance of the Sun, retrieved the distance of the Sun as far as 149.6 million kilometers from Earth. The issue is, The figure was 400 times greater than the distance of the moon to the Earth, and we always see the sun and the moon almost the same magnitude that caused eclipse total if the sun covered the moon. Then the new assumption was made, the sun and the moon looks the same magnitude but the distance is according to calculate Count Aristarchus before, 400 times even further because of the magnitude of the sun is 400 times larger than the moon. Here's how to measure with the formula in his mathematical calculations on paper. It's true, the science is also an exact science. Essentially the assumption was wrong from the beginning. Then begins the modern scientific dogma that the sun was really big. The sun is 109 times bigger than Earth, the magnitude of the sun 400 times larger than the moon but the distance is 400 times as far away so that the magnitude of the moon looks the same. Our senses and logic are defeated by the formula. From where did Aristarchus 2,300 years ago could ensure that a lunar eclipse occurred because the sign and the shadow of the Earth? Until now if it's true the eclipse happens because the moon enters the Earth's shadow, why NASA still uses Sarles calendar to predict an eclipse? Why NASA didn't count itself with the movement of the Earth around the sun? The answer is simple, because it is a matter of wrong assumptions result essentially all wrong. The eclipse will not be predicted if using those numbers. Direct observation of nature resulting in different things than observation through paper. The sun is so close behind the cloud, instead of 150 million kilometers as they say. The sun is not so big, you can see from the reflections in the cloud. Slide video cameras from a hot air balloon, reflection of white clouds that can only happen if its sun not as big and not as far as they say. From the surface of the Earth we can see the sunlight spread widen from behind the clouds. It's unlikely to happen if the sun is so far away and the Earth is curved. They equivocate that it was caused by the atmosphere, whereas if the Earth is curved and atmosphere certainly convex, and the light is not dilated like that but instead conical. We can prove himself this phenomenon by using a perforated cardboard paper followed the pattern of the clouds. If the sun is far like they say, it is evident that its light is not widened, we could see its sunlight in parallel. By using the same cardboard paper, if the light source is near as light for example, proven light dilated. This is an undeniable proof that the phenomenon of cloud rays showed that their sunlight close and local. The same trigonometric formula can be applied with different assumptions. No need to use assumptions of the shadow on the moon. Trigonometric calculation of the distance of the sun can be done with the assumption that more real, namely, the degree of slope of the sun, which can be measured from the shadows of objects on Earth. It takes at least 3 different locations. Just as Google Maps that can predict the distance of you by using 3 different telecom tower. The difference is, how to measure heights is we use a usual triangulation to measure the height of the building, and others. As a result, the distance of the sun only 3,583 miles or 5,766 kilometers only. Sun and moon so close. From that distance, it can be calculated the diameter of the sun, namely, 32 miles. So does the diameter of the moon, which is indeed almost the same magnitude. The sun and the moon is not as big as it was said during this time. Everyone could measure the distance and diameter of the moon and the sun without waiting for eclipses done by Aristarchus 2,300 years ago. Why calculate trigonometric based on the shadows on the moon? We can calculate trigonometric based on shadow on Earth. Problems of modern science figures there are essentially on the assumption that the moonlight is the reflection of the sunlight, and eclipses occur due to the moon enters the shadow of Earth. It is a theory, not fact. The moon had its own distinctance nature rays with rays of the sun. In fact, the effect of moonlight to animals and plants different from the effect of sunlight. The sunlight was hot, moonlight instead of cold. The sun and moon is a symbol of nature's balance, yin and yang. Along with the rise of flat Earth consciousness, many people measure the temperature of the moonlight. It's easy, by placing the two thermometers, one in a place exposed to moonlight, and one is placed nearby but not exposed to the rays of the moon. The result is very clear: the areas affected by moonlight have colder temperature than which is not exposed to the rays of the moon. This cannot be happening if the moonlight is the reflection of the sun. Because the moonlight is not a reflection of sunlight, then the eclipse is not caused by the Earth's shadow. Either if we look at the moon in the morning, it was clear to see that it is not the shadow of the Earth but the sky behind it. How can the shadow of the Earth can be colored sky blue like that? The moon is not spherical as they say. If observed carefully, sometimes in the body of the moon, the star can be seen behind it. That's why there is an ancient symbol of the moon and the stars. Where the stars do look really penetrates the body of the moon. As has been discussed at the previous episode, the assumption on top of assumption. If the assumptions are inherently wrong, then everything collapses. Moonlight instead of sunlight reflections. Then the eclipse is not due to the shadow of the Earth. As a result of the moon's diameter and distance of trigonometric become untrue, consequently the calculation of distance and diameter of the sun will be wrong anyway. As a result, the entire universe of calculation to be wrong and the whole science of modern cosmology to collapse. Here is video footage of famous mathematical experts trying to calculate eclipses by scientific number.
A solar eclipse is an absolute delight to behold, and so I'm going to show you the mathematics behind how we can predict when they're going to happen. We can do the calculations on the elliptical orbit of the moon as the Earth goes around the sun, and we can calculate how often the moon goes between the sun and the Earth. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. In fact, every single number I have given you in this video, every direction, every speed, every angle, every time, they're all only approximations. They're averages. The whole system is constantly changing. It is a wonder we have eclipses at all. What this means is we can't make any meaningful, proper, long-term predictions about solar eclipses. But then, out of all this chaos, another cosmic coincidence steps forward to save the day. It's called the Saros cycle, and it allows us to predict when eclipses are going to happen in the reasonably near future.
Then we return to the question at the beginning, why NASA has budged so great every year and are able to hire professors and doctoral fabulous anywhere in the world cannot use that number of figures to predict an eclipse? Not because of the professor and the doctor was stupid, but because the wrong numbers will not be used to predict eclipses. Instead, the professor and doctor it surely know that the figures it is actually wrong. They are part of the global elite.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
Thus, we conclude this topic number 6. The perception that the NASA eclipse predictions is a proof that the Earth is spherical and around the Sun is totally wrong. First, it is evident that NASA uses the Saros cycle created by the ancient Babylonians had nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. Second, propagating the various NASA animation about the occurrence of eclipses without the scale and calculation to confuse mankind throughout the world, as if the eclipse happens due to the movement of the Earth's orbit and the Moon. Third, NASA's inability to predict eclipses through propaganda and figure numbers dogmatic science that just shows that the numbers are actually wrong, as a result of the whole calculation of derivatives, namely the universe according to modern science is misdirection, false god who designed systematically to deprive mankind of the religion and divinity through the lies of the modern science.
The Earth is flat.
And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that the should be an area of Siggy's unexplored.